Your English is really good.
So where are you really from?
You're pretty for an Asian.
Wow, you're lucky your parents can afford test prep.
Aren't you supposed to be like really good at math?
You got a B? That's an Asian F.
Wait, what are you majoring in? Oh, let me guess, computer science.
You're going to become a doctor, right?
What is the model minority myth? According to dictionary.com, the term model minority refers to a minority group or a member of such a group stereotypically viewed as being more successful than other groups or individuals. It is often applied to Asian Americans. It promotes the stereotype that Asians are hardworking, smart, successful, and obedient. While these stereotypes may be considered complimentary, they can be harmful when students struggle to meet these lofty expectations. One of the earliest uses of the term model minority was from an article in the 1966 edition of the New York Times Magazine by sociologist William Peterson to describe Asian Americans as ethnic minorities who have achieved success in the U.S. He wrote that the Japanese cultures have strong work ethics and family values, which lift them above problem minorities, and is quoted as saying, "By any criterion of good citizenship that we choose, the Japanese Americans are better than any other group in our society, including native-born whites." According to Ellen Wu, an associate professor of history at Indiana University Bloomington, the portrayal of Asians as a model minority in the 1950s and 60s was also a way to discredit the claims of African Americans who were seeking racial and economic justice and demanding massive structural overhauls in American society during the civil rights movement. Since then, the model minority narrative has expanded from Japanese Americans to all Asian Americans. From articles praising whiz kids who can do it all, to memes poking fun at strict parents forcing their children to work harder and be better than everyone else. Let's start by asking our Portola students, staff, and alumni what their thoughts are on the model minority myth.
The model minority myth can very easily be packaged as something that is a compliment. Like, it's good to be told that you're smart, it's good to be told that you're perfect, and you are good at listening and you're quiet. But I feel like when you hold an entire community to that standard, it becomes something a little bit more uncomfortable because you're kind of setting an expectation, like, despite the cultural nuances or the differences in background and upbringing that any Asian American can have, they all turn out the same. And it really reduces the Asian community to a monolith where the differences and the struggles are invalidated because you're kind of expected to naturally be smart or naturally be of a certain aptitude.
Yeah, so the model minority myth, I feel like I think of it in like two different categories. Like, there's gonna be people in that minority group that are like really successful or really smart and like just like are good at everything they do, but that seems to be more of like a minority part of the minority, when the like a majority of that minority group is more like struggling to make ends meet and just like living in like a middle class society with nothing too special happening around it.
I think it's very problematic in a lot of ways. Actually took a class on this during my time in college, and the problem is that model minority blankets the term Asian and takes away focus from ethnicities that might need more help from the government and attention from the government compared to like those who are more successful. And this happens because a lot of times the United States gives out visas to, I don't know, software engineers or other highly skilled jobs and to bring people from like Asian countries.
Being a model minority student oftentimes comes with striving to meet high, unrealistic academic standards, turning school from a collaborative environment where students are excited to learn to a competitive one where students race to see who has the best grades and accomplishments. They prioritize their academics over their mental health, all to be one of hundreds of thousands of students applying for acceptance to a select few spots at an elite university. It's all about having the most filled, stacked resume, filled schedule. I equate myself with how busy I am, honestly. I feel like if I'm not doing something that, I'm being lazy and that I need to be productive. And if I'm not taking every honors or AP class that I can be, I'm not being a good student. And I think a lot of other people can agree with that as well. And it's made learning, a chore sometimes. And it feels like it's something that I just have to do. Like classes, I take it because I have to get that grade, not because I really want to learn that subject. Even though I wish I could focus more on just the process of learning, I feel like I'm doing everything for a grade.
I used to think that bigger was better. Doing as much as I could was the best that I could. So I would just try everything, and it was to the point where I would just burn myself out. I would have to be in 6 clubs. I would have to start this international nonprofit organization on top of getting a 1600 SAT and then getting straight A's. But I've kind of just winded down, and I've realized that the best results, being surrounded by so many people, it's only natural to think that, but the best results come from what you want to do, what you actually have a genuine passion for, and what your personal best is, not what the norm of best is, if that makes sense.
On the one hand, as an Asian American, I suddenly felt this pressure to perform incredibly well in school. And when I say incredibly well, I feel like there's no end points. No matter what grades I was getting, no matter what grades my peers were getting, we always felt like we weren't doing enough. And yeah, again, that affected our self-esteem, our own value in ourselves. And it also caused us to, I would say, judge and discriminate against other people too for their grades. It also takes away so much from the hard work that I put in myself genuinely, because then there's this assumption that I was naturally good at getting this particular grade because I'm Asian and it's in my genes that I could do math, especially for instance, or any other subject, when in reality I worked really hard for it. And therefore when I didn't do that well in it, for instance, my junior year of high school, I failed calculus. As a result of the model minority myth, I felt like a failure, and I didn't know how to ask for help. Because I was so ashamed, I didn't ask for help.
I think it's if your closest friends are studying with you, you guys will just keep studying. But if you ever have a question that you want to ask someone else, they might sometimes in specific competitions maybe withhold some information from you just to make sure they get that competitive advantage on you. And I think it's present throughout, I would say.
After getting into Dartmouth, all my problems did go away for 2 months. I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, this was my life goal. This is it. I'm so happy. And then I go to college and I realized, this is only the first step in life. Freshman year, I think a lot of times people are just there to meet friends, which is super nice. But as I grew older and now I'm a junior, people are now looking for internships and now looking towards, the next steps after college, living, where am I gonna live? What am I gonna do to make a living for myself and things like that. So definitely college is only the first step. Yeah, all my problems did not go away. In fact, so many more problems came along.
In the US, 6.1% of the population identify as Asian American or Pacific Islander. Of those, nearly 15% reported having a mental illness in the past year. That is over 2.9 million people, more than the number of dentists, post-secondary teachers, and lawyers in the US combined. According to a 2017 data report from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, suicide is the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. When broken down by race, suicide is the first leading cause of death among Asian American young adults ages 15 to 24. While mental illness is a serious concern among the AAPI community, AAPI adults are the racial group least likely to seek mental health services, 3 times less likely than their white counterparts. This raises the question, why don't more people who identify as AAPI seek mental health care support?
So as someone who has undergone mental health struggles myself with depression, I felt like parents were a huge influence in helping me to cope with my depression. And so it's been very heartbreaking for me when my AAPI students come to me for mental health support and they feel like they're stuck because they feel like their parents just think it's just a phase that you'll get through, keep plugging away, mental health doesn't exist. And so as a result, they cannot receive any outside support for what they're currently going through. And so I feel like that's a big part that I feel like we need to shift in terms of understanding that mental health is health and that we need to take it seriously, because what's the use of going to a prestigious school where when you're unhappy at the end of the day?
My mom, I think due to her culture and where she came from in China, she never really learned too much about mental health. The only words in Chinese that she would use when talking about mental health were words that meant crazy. And it was never even used in a derogatory way on purpose. For instance, we do have some relatives where they have, now I understand they have mental health problems, but the only word she used in Chinese for them was they were crazy. At a certain point in their life, they went crazy or they lost their mind. And I think that lack of vocabulary speaks a lot to the lack of understanding, again, not to our own fault, but a lack of understanding in terms of mental health.
We kind of find joy, or I've witnessed a lot of people find joy or kind of feel pride in maybe not sleeping as much as they should, or maybe pulling all-nighters to study for something, because like if disregarding that, if putting your mental health, if putting your health aside gets you the results that you want, then that's just something that you have to do.
Mental health has always been a touchy subject with my parents, especially because Vietnamese people and Asian American people in general, there's a large stigma around mental health. And it's really like, they don't really treat mental health as a real sickness or like a real problem when it is. And so if I feel like I'm struggling mentally, it's more like a suck it up, like, or hide it. You know, I don't feel comfortable sharing, you know, when I'm having a bad mental health day, because it doesn't feel real. I feel like it doesn't get validated.
During my time at Dartmouth, freshman year to be exact, 3 of my peers died by suicide, and oftentimes I think they just didn't get the help that they needed, and they didn't have the support system that they really needed at the moment, which is definitely hard. And I feel that after that incident, Dartmouth put in like more efforts into taking care of their students' mental health that I wish they did before. And but now we have like teletherapy and like free access to therapy. So if I ever need someone to talk to, like I can just go to like just schedule an appointment online, and I can like, if it's my schedule well and like my timeline, which has definitely like helped me just talk about my problems. And I feel like going into college, like anxiety grows. You're meeting new people, you're in a new environment, and I felt very anxious a lot of times. So I decided to utilize the service, and I feel like I definitely reaped the benefits of like Dartmouth doing better, like stepping up to like the challenges we face today.
With the academic and mental health challenges the AAPI community faces with meeting expectations, where can we start with dismantling this myth?
So one way I think we can start by trying to overcome the model minority myth is with ourselves. For instance, in our conversations with friends, where we can make an active effort to stop talking about grades as much. I don't blame students for talking about school, because it's not like you have another full-time job, right? I don't blame students for doing that, but you can focus on other parts of your everyday school academic life. You can choose to not talk about the actual grade that you got, and from there talk about how therefore it shows that you're stupid, or that it shows that you're not good enough. I think changing the everyday dialogue that you have with your friends that focuses so much on grades and how it defines us as human beings, that's one step in the right direction. I think some of us could actually listen to our parents who I've found as a teacher are worried so much for their students that they're the ones telling their students, it's okay. You don't have to take all honors or AP. You don't have to get straight A's. I've noticed parents doing that in parent-teacher conferences. Asian parents, which have been incredibly healing for me, but I also still see the student beating themselves up. And I think maybe if we are lucky enough to have those parents who try and convince us not to put so much pressure on ourselves, that we listen to them as well. Of course, there are unfortunately a lot of pressure that comes from home for a lot of students. And in that case, maybe even coming to teachers, because we as Irvine Unified teachers are aware of these pressures, and we can, even though we can get caught up in the lessons and talking about the grade and proficiency levels and wanting to get you to be at a successful level, we're also human beings who went through the trials and tribulations of school as well, especially as Asian American teachers. And you can come and we can commiserate and we can help you talk through some hard times, hard challenges that you're going through as well.
So if there is one message that I could send to my AAPI students, it's that who you are isn't determined by where you get accepted. I feel like a lot of my students place their self-worth and their self-esteem based off of where they get accepted. And it's kind of based off of a more outdated model that going to a good college will lead to success, when that's not really a guarantee nowadays. Because I think with the internet and now with artificial intelligence, I believe that universities aren't the gatekeepers for the knowledge. And so it's not so much about doing well on tests and regurgitating information, because that's widely available. It's more so learning how to use your critical thinking skills, learning how to apply the knowledge you've gained to solve the problems that we face in society today. And so I feel like the more students are authentic to what they want to do in terms of their strengths and interests, as opposed to what looks good on a resume, I feel like not only will they be happier because they're living more authentic lives to themselves, but also as someone who reads applications for UC Irvine as an admissions reader, you end up being a more attractive applicant. Another big thing is to don't be afraid to ask for help, both academically and with your mental health. Because part of growing and succeeding is failing. And if you're afraid to fail, you're kind of stuck in a box and your own comfort zone to where it can be harmful.
Well, internally, like, I want to tell everybody in the Asian American community that it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to not be the best at something. I feel like a lot of the time we expect ourselves to excel in every aspect of our lives, but that's just not how learning works. And I wish more people fell in love with the learning process, because it's not just you're the best at everything. And I think that also is a reason why a lot of people don't try new things, is because, you know, if we think that we're not going to be the best at it immediately, we're afraid. And so it's okay to make mistakes and to try new things.
I think from an Asian to an Asian, it's important to remember that you don't always have to be perfect. I think it's important to remember that taking a break doesn't mean you're stopping. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to move forward anymore. I think being proud of yourself doesn't mean you're being complacent, and being happy that you got an A doesn't mean that you won't have any other goals. I think it's really important to validate everything you're feeling in the moment and to understand that you are more than what other people tell you to be. And I think it's okay to remember that you can take up space, you deserve to take up space, and you deserve to ask for help and shake the boat and cause a ruckus when you need to, because that is who you are as a person and you should honor that. And I think to other people who aren't Asian, I think starting with learning about the model minority myth is a really great way to begin, and just understand that there is a certain expectation that's held over the Asian community, and it kind of lulls over us like a little bit of a shadow. And I think just being cognizant of that, asking your friends if they're okay, asking them if they need help, making sure that you aren't perpetuating this stereotype with certain microaggressions, and just being a little bit more conscientious of the things you say is a really great way to start.